All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the HourGlass podcast, and you're joining Tim and Kareen, and it's just Tim and Kareen today because we're back to our usual schedule. I don't know if it is sad, isn't it? We've had some good times reviewing the shows and having people on having Sam on, not people, having Sam on. So shout out to Sam if you're listening. Thanks for joining us. We miss you.
It was nice to have the trio together, but we're back.
We'll have some more guests on soon too, guys, so stay tuned for that. We just got to organize times and places and all that sort of stuff. But today we're going to talk about reverse phase, or we've done an episode on reverse phase, so we're going to touch on it, but more in tune with setting yourself up for a good off season, because obviously there's a right and a wrong way to reverse in terms of recovery, but we just want to now link that to having a productive off season, especially for bikini, obviously, since this is a bikini podcast. But, there is a lot of things that go into the off season that maybe some people don't know. And I think we just wanted to touch on that now. Since we are post season A lot of people in reverse phase, it's good to just get your head straight and focus on what you're trying to achieve over the next couple of months, depending on when your show is. Yeah, we just wanted to sort of add a bit of value there for the listeners. So we'll get stuck into it. Just a quick one today. We've been chewing you guys' ears off for the last couple of weeks, so we'll just keep it short, but really touch on the main topics, the main points. Did you have anything you wanted to say straight away? I think we were talking about it before. You actually gave it a good name of signing a life contract as a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I was just saying that after your first prep, you basically sign yourself up for a lifetime guarantee of never being the same ever.
Yeah.
Whether that's from an eating standpoint or gym standpoint, the way that you see progress and value progress as well. Great thing is that every time you compete, take this past season A, for example, everyone on that stage, whatever the outcome, whether they won or whether they came last, everyone's got something to improve on. Even if you walk away with a pro card, you still got something to, which is the best thing about competing, because I think we're all addicted to improvement, all addicted to the delayed gratification, and you're just restarting that cycle until the next time you hop on stage or the next time you feel fulfilled and happy with your progress and have a goal that you are working on achieving.
I'd say that's probably, in my experience as a coach, very different as in my experience as an athlete, because obviously I wasn't a bikini athlete, but with coaching a lot of bikini girls, that's the common issue, is coming from let's say a first show, reversing, recovering pretty good, getting the hormones back on track, dealing with that whole, fluctuating sort of possibly just a lot of sensitive fluctuations and mood changes and all that sort of stuff. Getting back on track, but then also being in a position where you're challenging yourself with this idea of returning to normality, or what you would perceive as normal. A lot of people, maybe they come from a different lifestyle, do a show, change their habits in the prep. And I think that's probably the major, or maybe they don't change them completely, but they're just a lot more focused. They don't have as much freedom in a prep due to choice and everything, because they want to look good for a certain day. But then that sort of realization that I can make changes or make choices in my life now that I couldn't, can lead to a bit of conflict, Have you ever experienced anything like that? I'd say that's probably the most common problem for reversing and starting an off season to try and improve optimally, because in bikini, we want to keep things relatively tight. We don't want to blow out and gain 20 kilos in off season. We want to stay 8 to 10 kilos above stage weight. When you think back to your first off season, did you experience anything like that? I know we've touched on this briefly, but now more so, I'd say this is also your longest off season. We were talking about that before as well. How would you say that sort of differs now, considering you've now done 2 seasons?
I think you're so right in talking about the sensitivities that come after the show day, because you get such a thrill of emotions when you hop on stage. It's you've been, living the same day for however many weeks, months, and you have this final show day that you're locked in for, and you can see improvements every single day, every single week towards that show day. And when that's suddenly gone, and when that end date is suddenly taken away from you, it can feel like you have this abundance of all these things you've been missing out on that can really get very tempting if you haven't worked in on your end goal again, right? Just
Yep.
reevaluating your goal. I find after each of my shows, or I guess at the end of each of my seasons, I'm very big on journaling. I've told you this before. Like
Yep.
when I feel a lot of emotion, that's something that I always come back to. So yeah, after all my seasons, I get out my notes and I write down all my emotions because like you are just in such an emotional state. Whatever the outcome that happened, if you won, if you lost, you're in such an emotional state. And I think getting that down on paper, the way that you felt, the way that you're setting yourself up to move forward, what you want to see improvements on, how the day went, what differences you could make. I think that's a really great way to start. It gives you your current state and kind of sets a little bit of a framework for you in how you want to approach where you want to go after that.
Yep. Yeah, I find, definitely being aware of yourself and your values and your long-term goal helps. But I would say the most, I guess the stickiest situation is like once you are through recovery is realizing, okay, I actually am not returning back to where I was. I want to stay leaner. I want to stay in a better position. I want to stay in more control of my nutrition. And I think that depending on where you want to go as an athlete, whether you want to compete again soon, or even like, maybe not at all, depends on, obviously that's going to be a different approach. But if you want to compete anytime soon, you've got to now realize that my life is completely different compared to what it was. So obviously, like, ideally you would build those habits prior to a prep, but let's say for some reason you've established those habits more so in the prep, you've got to then continue to reinforce them, even though you do have that freedom of no show. You've got to continue to reinforce them so that you don't lose what you've worked for, and you also, you're setting yourself up for the best possible outcome at the next show. So that realization can sometimes be quite daunting. Would you, obviously journaling, planning a timeline with your coach? I think what you mentioned something that worked for you the other day, Kareen, with putting yourself on stage, editing yourself on stage against some pros or like your competition and seeing just how far away you are or where you need to improve, things like this. Just being aware of what really needs the focus can take your focus away from the fact that you're hungry and tired and your hormones are all over the place, and these sort of little fluctuations, these temporary fluctuations, you can distract yourself from those by thinking bigger picture. And I think that's something you mentioned worked really well for you. I think we went through that after both shows, really. Yeah, just putting yourself. I remember we put you next to Jen Dory. Remember?
Humbling, but needed.
But it's useful because if that is your goal, you've got to put yourself there. You've got to either visualizing it, being there yourself, or like literally tangibly putting yourself there in a photo so you can see, okay, bit of a wake-up call, reality check. I look pretty good, but I need to look better. And to look like that goal physique that I have, these are the habits and behaviors I need to have between now and my next show, or now until I look like that and beyond. And accepting that this is the choice, this is the lifestyle choice I'm making for the foreseeable future, goes a long way to helping you manage these little short-term displeasures. I think you said that before, is like signing up for a lifetime of displeasure is the contract you make as a bodybuilder.
I was even speaking to a client about this today, where it's like, I was explaining how if you look at bodybuilding on a surface level, or maybe are finding it hard to navigate at the moment, it can seem like in every phase of your bodybuilding journey, it's very hard to find satisfaction, and it's very hard to just sit and be happy in stillness, because we're wired to always be better, always improve. Like, say in your off season, you might feel super fluffy, you might feel super uncomfortable, you might be shoveling down food, it might feel super, just you're not feeling your best. But then you switch that into like your cutting season, and then suddenly you feel small, you feel tired, you feel hungry, you don't feel lean enough yet. So it's really important in those situations, or in all situations really, is to set yourself up for the small wins so you can still feel satisfied and you can still find your accomplishments and achievements, because our brains are literally just wired that way, especially as bodybuilders. We need those small wins throughout every single season to feel happy and look forward to the next improvement. So coming out of a show, you know, what's going to be your small win this week? This week, I'm going to stick to my reverse plan. I'm going to maybe have that one off-plan meal, sharing with my family and friends, and enjoy it as good quality time spent with other people. And then, you know, the next week I can go do that photo shoot that I was looking forward to and still feel tight and happy and proud of myself. And then the week after that, maybe you can start to feel a little bit stronger in the gym. And, you know, a week after that, I can start hitting that next weight that I was after on the hip thrust. You know, small things like that. That's going to keep you stable, and that's going to keep you progressing in the direction that you want to. So yes, it's about the end goal and the end picture, but it's also about all the little steps in between you now versus that as well. Otherwise, you're just going to fall flat every time chasing it.
No, I love that. That's a really good insight, and it's so true. You know, I think we like you focus on that one day, like you said, and you build it up, and you kind of like that's gonna, in your mind, that's the resolution and like that's the fulfillment aspect. But realistically, when you look at it, the overall picture, you've got to have that every week. You can't, and that's something that I think you do very well, is that you don't put so much, you don't invest so much into a particular thing, and you sort of spread it out. So I think for anyone listening, if you're struggling with compliance post-show, or even just generally, you've got to find those little rewards, find those little wins in your week. And there's some really good strategies there from Kareen. Photo shoots are great as well. You've done a few this off season. You know, I think it's a great way to keep you grounded and focused on not looking your best, but not looking your worst either, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, you know, finding that little bit of, you're just like, it's my off season, a completely different look, but I still feel happy with it, and I still feel strong, and I can still look my best. I can get done up, I can feel excited and pose and things like that. So that's just another thing. Like, you don't have to be shredded to be happy and okay with the progress that you've been making as well.
Yep. So that's more about the mindset moving into off season. Obviously, just quickly with regards to the physical aspects and psychological aspects, you know, recovery, we want to make sure that we're physically recovered. So that obviously comes down to resting enough, reducing your training volume post-show. It's a good opportunity to set up a new training phase. So obviously, you know, you've seen yourself in stage conditions. So this is where I need to improve. This is the judge's feedback. So this is the training program I'm going to have to improve those things. It's a good chance to really try some exercises, look at your training technique, and really just set yourself up so that when you are fully recovered, you're ready to push things up. It's also a great opportunity to get your mental health back on track. Often this is going to require more food, more body fat, you know, all these things that can be uncomfortable, like you said. So having these little objectives to determine whether you've recovered or not is important, but then having other things psychologically to keep you distracted and give you that satisfaction, like you just said, can help you get to that recovered spot as quickly as possible so that you can proceed with, you know, improving. And that's ultimately why we're here. So if you can set that up strategically, have a really good timeline in place, analyze yourself with your coach, where you need to improve, put yourself there in the future, doing all these things simultaneously, and then planning your weeks so that you're not just going about your day randomly and hoping for the best. You're actually like, today I need to do this, tomorrow I need to do that. And then before you know it, you've 6 weeks post-show, you've recovered, your hormones are back on track, you've done a photo shoot, you're happy with yourself, you moved on, now you're focusing on the next improvement phase. And that's where, that's ultimately the fun. But the recovery's, I would say, out of all the phases, the shittiest one. You know, it's like recovery really just sucks because you're not progressing, you're kind of regressing, and you've really got to distract yourself. You've got to work really hard to distract yourself from what's happening physically, and focus on projecting yourself into the future mentally so that you are already in the mindset of what I need to do to be better, and only do things that do make you better. Don't do things that make you worse. I think that's really key, is like, before you make a decision, is this food, is this activity, is this thing that I want to do making me better, or is it bringing me something positive that is ultimately going to make me a better athlete.
Yeah.
And then once we're into the that's kind of what we want to move to now, is like once we're in the improvement phase, there's a whole different approach to this depending on what your goals are. And I have this discussion with athletes all the time. Can I have a cheat meal? Or what happens when I go on holidays? Or how to navigate different circumstances that may come up. And I think you've got to see this process in layers. There's the ultimate extreme end where you're just perfect all the time. And then there's the ultimate extreme end where you're just never compliant at all. And obviously we don't want to be not compliant at all, because that we're doing the wrong thing then. We may as well find something else to do. But we also don't want to expect ourselves to be perfect all the time either, because that's not realistic. So somewhere towards that end of extreme is ideal. But then you've got to establish, I'm not going to be perfect all the time. I accept that. There's things that I do need in my life to be happy, to be productive. And so my goal of improving my physique in this way, at this rate, in this capacity, in the next 6 months requires these things of me. And being realistic about that goal, and saying, then aligning your decisions to that process, to that goal, and deciding whether it is going to allow that timeline to stay true, or whether you're going to need more time based on these things that you value. Is that something you've done? We've done that together with the timeline, but is that something you actively do? Is this decision going to benefit me with the timeline I have, or is it just something that comes naturally?
Yeah, no, I do have that thought process. Obviously, in my improvement phase, I am much more lenient. I do enjoy life. I do enjoy going out and eating food, hanging with loved ones, having that quality time. But I am always mindful. Like we said, after bodybuilding, you're never really the same. So I don't have any old habits from my younger years that have taken into this chapter with me. I'm always super mindful of what I'm consuming and what I need to get done in my schedule. I have everything planned out to a T in my schedule. I literally have 15 minutes blocked out in my calendar to water my plants, everything is very calculated to a T. So if I do want to go enjoy something, that's calculated. Not in I need to starve myself the next day, or I need to do this or that, but I just be mindful of how often I am going out and how often I'm staying on my meal plan, and how that makes me feel as well. If I do have a string of days where I've just been off and I've missed training or I've missed meals and things like that, it doesn't make me feel good, because it's taking me further away from my goal. So I'm mindful of that as well, because it's not just this goal I'm working towards, but it's also just being in a good headspace and feeling accomplished and keeping the promises that I make to myself as well. We were just talking about this. It's the quickest way to gain respect for yourself, is just keeping the promises that you make to yourself and showing up for yourself and backing yourself as well. If you are, going down a little spiral, eating off planned meals, binging, skipping workout days, it's just you're kind of losing respect for yourself, and you're not showing up because you don't feel like the athlete that you could be. You don't feel like you're living up to your potential. So if you could find a nice little balance between that, where it's also no, I'm human, I can enjoy myself now, and I've planned to enjoy myself on this day, and then the next couple of days I'm also going to feel the best because I'm going to go back on track. And it's not from a negative mind space. It's not I have to do this, I have to wake up early and go to work and gym and stuff like that. It's more and it's so cliche, but it's definitely I get to do this, and that's what fuels me, and that's what keeps me grounded in my vision for what I want.
I definitely see a common mindset among bikini athletes who are very successful in their off season, in reverse phase, and that is the fact that they've built the habits prior to the show. So that's step one, prior to the prep, sorry. So you've at least, in some capacity, focused on being as consistent as possible before you even enter into a prep phase. Then they've had a successful, healthy prep where they've managed fatigue, they've managed their mental health as best they can. They haven't starved themselves and done hours of cardio. They've done great strategy in their prep, stay as healthy as possible. And then the recovery is then just a reflection of where they're at in their health. So they just need to recover from that. And that's where then leading into the off season, the only difference is now you're eating more and your same habits that you've built prior to the even prep phase are continuing through. So nothing really changes from that initial habit establishment to then needing those habits to stay intact to keep yourself on track in an off season. It's just a change in variables inside that. But it's also the mindset shift that takes place is realizing that whole system is related to itself, and the habits that you've built earlier, you're going to continue those through, but then liking the person you are as a result of those habits. So if you like the person you are and you see the value in maintaining that lifestyle, you're more likely to make those decisions when you need to, rather than feel like obligated in a negative sense. Like you said, it's not defensive. It's like, I just want to feel good. I want my digestion to be good. I don't want to be bloated. I want to feel lean in the morning when I wake up. I want to feel good in gym clothes. I want to see the progress in my check-in photos. I want to train well and progress and recover. All these things about the consistency is manifesting itself in a positive reaction when you see it and you think about it, rather than a negative one, rather than feeling obligated or, like you're letting someone down if you don't do it, or just guilty if you do something else. It's all of these positive, progressive, sort of offensive emotions. That's when I see the most effective or optimal phase from an athlete, is when they've gotten to that spot mentally, and they've been there for a while as well. It's not something that you don't sort of just start, I'm going to compete and hope for the best. It takes a bit of time, and you do really have to be aware of who you are. And also, sometimes in a prep, maybe it doesn't go so well. You do really have to force the condition, or sometimes it doesn't go as smoothly and you really have to push the cardio or something, whatever. And so you don't necessarily like who you are in that process. But the trick there is to, instead of relating the whole prep to that feeling of negativity around not liking who you are when you're pushing it, that is realizing, okay, that's not ideal. I need to have a better approach. I need to have a better off season. And if I have a better off season, a better approach, I won't have to go back to that place where I have to push so hard that I don't like that stuff about myself. I don't like that extremity. And it really isn't necessary in bikini. If you can manage things better and address that and look at the problems and go, okay, how do we set it up better for next time so we don't have to be like that? Then you're not going to relate that whole negative experience to bodybuilding or prep in general. And you can just continually improve. And that's what I see often when I work with athletes who really have a massive shift in their habits to get on stage. That's often the most difficult part, is then like we've had to shift so much body fat or so much fluid or just change the habits so drastically closer to a show that there's a relationship between that experience and the overall experience. And that's something that we want to move away from. So if you're feeling like that, ladies, post-show, just know that it can be better if you apply yourself. So it's even more reason to be more disciplined and more structured so that you can get yourself to a position where you don't have to feel like that. Do you agree, Kareen?
Yeah, I think the most important part here is to look at everything with excitement. After stepping off stage, look at this next phase with excitement. Like, okay, this is exciting. I'm going to recover. I'm going to put all my effort into getting my hormones back on track, getting my meal plan sorted, maybe starting to figure out if I want to macro track or have a little bit of freedom. How am I going to go about that? And then that next phase afterwards in your off season, that's the time to look at it with excitement as well. You know, start thinking about the person that you're evolving into. Because that's what happens with every phase. You go through your lows, you go through your highs, but you evolve as a person as well. So as daunting as it can be, the reverse phase and the off season and things like that, it's coming back to looking at everything as a chance to improve and an opportunity to get better than you ever have been in whichever phase you're heading into.
Yeah. And it's always like, that's why I always encourage taking more time to do your first show, because that's often where it's after that first show, or even second. First two shows is often the most, I guess, awakening, experiences. You realize just what it takes, first of all, but then you also realize what you need to continue doing, and that can be the most, like you said, daunting part. Holy crap! I'm now having to be consistent, and there's no reward of looking better, realizing that the delayed gratification has to get like tenfold at some stages is pretty hard to handle, especially when you're like hormonal, emotional, hungry, and you're not looking your best. And then you also have to just stick to your diet. That is tough, So I think that's where the journal needs to come out, and you really need to identify these feelings and work with your coach. This is where your coach comes in handy, is provide you with perspective, provide you with solutions, provide you with education on why things are happening. And I think a really educated, well-informed athlete will find all of these circumstances a lot easier to handle.
Yeah. I was about to ask, how would you approach maybe a client who's just getting into their off season, or maybe like already quite deep into their off season or improvement season, who's hit a little bit of a mental wall, and they feel like they haven't been progressing, or they're not seeing the progress, and they don't know where to go to from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really common. So it's a great question. The first thing to do is to understand, what is the long-term goal? Where do we want to be? What are we trying to achieve? Usually if someone's experiencing these things that you said, there's no clarity on the goal. They can't actually place themselves where they want to be, or they can't actually place themselves anywhere. They don't have clarity on where they're going. And it's the same as when you get in a car and you type in the destination. You know where you're going, you got to turn right here, you got to turn there. It's going to take 16 minutes. You've got a plan in your mind of what to expect. When you get in a car with no plan, you've just lost. You're just driving around, you've got no idea. So that's the same with bodybuilding. You've got to have a very clear visualization. You've got to almost close your eyes and just see it straight away. It's got to come that quickly and easily. And if you don't have that, that's what I encourage people to do, is like, we have a conversation. Where do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? How's it going to make you feel? How is not achieving that going to make you feel? So you have an alternative, like a contrast between it happening and not happening. And then once you start to process these things and it sinks in, and you've got sometimes they have to go away and think about it for a week or so and really establish that. When you've got that in your mind and you know how you're going to feel when you don't achieve something, and it's motivating enough to make you feel something significant, like I'm going to feel like horrible, or like just really just guilty, or like, that regretful feeling, whatever it is, some negativity, then you've got motivation, or intrinsic motivation is a better word for it, to not let that happen. And then you've also got a clear understanding of what you want to achieve. So now you know what you want. Now you know what you don't want to feel. So you've got motivation to not feel that. And then you come up with a plan to make that thing happen and to avoid that other thing. So that's the Kickstarter. It doesn't solve everything, because you still have to build those habits. But once you have clarity over where you're going, it makes the daily tasks, the weekly targets, the monthly check-ins, whatever it is, so much easier to adhere to, because you're like, and then if you fall off track at that point, you've got a coach who can hold you accountable to that long-term goal, but you've also got that negative emotion that you're reminded of as soon as you think about that thought, like, okay, how am I going to feel if I don't win this show, or if I don't look this way? You can constantly keep yourself in check. You're going to make mistakes still, but you're then going to be able to see, is this thing that I'm doing continuously worth the negative emotion that I'll feel if I continue doing this thing? And by continuing to do this thing, you're actually telling yourself that it is this temporary comfort, this temporary feeling of dopamine or happiness or whatever, is actually worth more to me than this negative emotion. And so then you're able to constantly analyze and establish whether that thing is actually worth doing. So it's a kickstart in the right direction, but it's also a polarizing experience, where often you either, at that moment, if you make a couple more mistakes from that moment, you're either pushed really hard in that right direction, or you're just seeing that you don't really want it that bad. But the good thing about that is you don't waste any more time. If it isn't something you really want, you don't waste any more time. And if you realize it is something you really want, you're no longer wasting time, because you just go even harder in that same direction. So it's a really good experience. It sometimes take a couple of weeks, but when you go through that process of establishing that clarity, establishing those emotions around the outcome or lack of outcome, and then making more mistakes, you find out very quickly whether you want it or not. So I find that that happens with athletes a lot.
That's so cool. You know what I loved? That little car analogy. God, that's just such like I was thinking about it after you said it, I was like marinating on it a little bit, and I was like, that is such a great visualization for how goal setting works. You get that final destination there, and you're like, I got to take this right turn, this left turn, go straight 100 meters, and then maybe you run into like roadworks, you got a detour, and like, you know, to reroute and things like that. And I'm like, oh wow. So whenever you do feel stuck, yeah, just like look at that final destination. Is that actually where I want to keep heading to, or should I reroute? Should I go into? And this doesn't just apply to athletes as well. This could apply to just lifestyle people who want to keep improving. Maybe their end destination is, okay, I want to put on some muscle, and then they get there, and then they're gonna go to the next destination. It's like, okay, I want to go into a maintenance phase or a cut phase, or even in any capacity of life. That's such a great little like tool to use and keep coming back to. Just like look at your little road mass and get you from A to B.
Yeah, and like that's the situation, I guess, with people who often find themselves in situation in that mindset where they're unsure or conflicted or they're just struggling with it. I like to polarize the situation, help them understand whether it's if it's, what's that saying? It's like, it's either a fuck yes or it's a fuck no, you know? And I think with bodybuilding, it has to be a fuck yes. Like, it have to be just so ready to do what it takes to get that thing, because you would be devastated if you didn't. It has to be that. It has to be, I will die trying because I don't want to live without it. You know? That's what it has to be.
It's so real.
And if you can get to that spot, then I'm not going to say that lightly. It is difficult to get to that spot, right? That's why very little people achieve great things, because, you know, you can be good at it, but not exceptional, right? But being exceptional at something takes a different mindset, and we'll talk about it in a second. But being able to polarize a decision is a skill, and you have to be really in tune with yourself. And so sometimes you just need to take a step away from what you're doing and actually just get perspective on your life and realize, do I really want this? Fuck yes. Or do I not care that much? Fuck no. And then it makes it easy, because if it's a fuck yes, then sticking to a diet is really quite simple. It's not a difficult task. Being consistent, holding your values true to yourself, you know, keeping everything in mind and being aware of your goals is not a difficult task. If it's a fuck no, then you haven't wasted any more time and you can get on with the rest of your life and just, you know, go about your business. And that's why I think it's really important as coaches, or as a coach, to not like sugarcoat it, like just be blunt and just be like, hey, you know, I have questions all the time, like, how should I proceed in the reverse phase? I'm like a pro. Like, if you want to be a pro, you've got to act like a pro. So let's not make it okay to make these mistakes. Let's avoid these mistakes. Let's be better than that, because your expectation is way up here and your current actions are way down here. So what do you want? What are you expecting of yourself if your actions are way below your expectations? And so that realism often is the Kickstarter. It either stimulates passion and like gets you to drive harder, or you just go, it's not for me, because you're competing against people who are willing to do more, go to great lengths, because they will die for this goal. And so you've got to be in that position where you're not, you know, I guess we move on to that now, is like the different goals, right? Being pro, just being a little bit better, maybe a lifestyle goal. You know, we have some girls listening that aren't necessarily trying to be pro athletes and things like this, so it doesn't really apply to you. And there's a different approach, you know, maybe you're reversing out of a photo shoot or something like that. Different approaches, different balance, different expectations based on the goal. But that extreme polarizing mindset is still necessary, because most people that look great at some point have to go without something to look like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not like to look like you look in the off season. You're not eating anything you like. You're not just eating whatever, you know, you're consistently making decisions that align with your goals and saying no to things. I mean, how do you say no more than you say yes?
I do, but the funny thing is that I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, like, because I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I feel, I don't know, it's weird because you kind of, when you enjoy something, your whole life kind of starts to revolve around it because it's truly what makes you happy, you know? I was literally just thinking, you were saying something about like it takes exceptional people to do exceptional things, you know? And I was thinking about, I went to this concert last night and the little band who opened it, they started off as like buskers and they like grew up just busking and they loved it, you know. They were talking about like every weekend they'd go out and they'd busk or just play music and they'd love it. And you know, to any other person they'd be like, wow, they did that like every single weekend and just, you know, had fun and enjoyed it. Like what a chore to set all that up. But in the end, like here they are opening for this massive name because they enjoyed it and they just kept going at it. And yeah, they could have been doing anything else than, you know, playing for like little petty coins and stuff like that. But they enjoyed it. And eventually that led to like something so much greater than they could have imagined, simply because they found happiness in it and that felt true to them. And they just kept going with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's crucial is you got to, when you boil down all of the difficult things and you get rid of them and you get to the core like activity of bodybuilding or bikini building, whatever you want to say, you have to love it so much that it's like a relationship. You have to love the person so much that it's worth all of the stuff that other people wouldn't put up with, you know? Like it's true, right? It's like yourself, like you're going to have little things about yourself that you put up with. You live with yourself, you know, that's your habits and things. So if you love yourself, you're going to be okay with your choices to achieve something. And so it's the same thing. It's like you have to love this sport so much that you're willing to go without this, and this, because you don't love those things. Like, why do you, if you love them, you can go and do them, you know? You like them, you enjoy them, they feel good, but you don't love them like you love this. And so realizing that, coming to terms with that, it takes time. I don't think people, but once you do, the best thing to do is just lean into that as hard as you can. Yeah, I think, like more to that point that you were making before about, what was it about, setting things up like every weekend? What did you say?
Buskers. Yeah. They'd play on the side of the street for little bits of coins.
Yeah. I think that's a good example like of the same sort of approach to bodybuilding is that, you're going to be in the spotlight more than you're in the spotlight. And so there's that saying, it's like, discipline is doing things like you love them, even if you hate them. I think that's a cool saying because if you love something, then there's all these little things that go with it, like setting up, like, you know, if you love playing music, you'd love to just open for this band straight away, but that you can't just do that straight away. So you've got to do all of the shit that was required of you to get there because you love it anyway. So like, what would your life look like without that thing in it? And so it's the same with bodybuilding. It's like all the stuff that goes with being a great bodybuilder. You have to love that. Even if you hate it, you have to love it. You have to act like you love it because it means that you're going to get to where you want to be in the thing that you love. As soon as you have that mindset, you actually stop hating the little things because you value them. You're like, this is testing me. This is like character building. And this is actually putting me in a position where I have to choose to enjoy and smile. And that's where I'm going to beat someone else because I love it more than that.
Yes. I had this internal thought the other week and I was like thinking to myself, I was like, oh, that's so powerful because I was just like scrolling on Instagram, like my whole Instagram feed is just bodybuilders, you know how it is. Yeah. And I found like, it was just one of these bikini pros that like I've always loved and like her physique is amazing, like just the craziest physique, wackiest like glutes, waist, shoulders, things like that. And I kind of like sat and I thought to myself, I was like, if I could like instantaneously swap places with her right now, like bodies with her, I could just wake up one day and have the physique that she has. Would I be happy with that? Like, would I be content with that? And I sat and I thought, and I was like, I literally wouldn't because I hadn't worked to look like that yet, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there'd be no satisfaction in just waking up one day and looking like that. Like, I'd much rather look at myself 365 days a year, years on end, and watch myself slowly morph into the physique that I want,
100%.
rather than boom, wake up and have it without putting any of the work in. Because what's the glory in that? Like, what's your win? Where's your satisfaction there?
Oh, it's so powerful. It gives me goosebumps, man. That's crazy.
Right?
Because it's the same in anything. Like, get into it. Like, maybe there are people that get into bodybuilding because they want to look a certain way and they achieve that. And that's where, they only wanted to get on stage as a challenge, and they achieved that. And so the reverse is a lot harder because, they've already achieved that thing. And so like the recovery from that thing is harder than the actual thing itself. And so that's understandable, because you've ticked that thing off and you no longer want to continue living like that, and you just want to kind of go back to normal. And so the recovery from bodybuilding lifestyle back to normal lifestyle is going to be defined by your values still, right? But if you get into it because you love the process, then that's where it is a catch-22, because you're aiming to get on stage to be judged by people. You understand that, but you get into it because you love the process. So at some stage close to a show, you stop thinking about the process and you start thinking about the destination, because it's a looming destination. It's like, when you use the car explanation again, it's like when you get to your destination, you're at your destination, you're there for this certain thing that you're going for. It's less likely that you're going to think about the next drive, but a smart athlete and a smart coach and a smart athlete will already plan that next trip. They'll already have the next thing planned from this destination to the next destination, because they realize that process it's inevitable, but it's also so necessary to continue. Right? You cannot stay at this destination forever, as good as it may be. Even if it was a shit outcome or a good outcome, you cannot stay there. Life goes on, so you have to be constantly planning and executing on the next drive, so that you're able to stay process focused. And I think that talking about the mindset shifts in off season, that's what we would use the recovery phase for, is just really shifting from outcome focused, which is what a bodybuilding show is, to process focused. I mean, you can still boil a bodybuilding show down into tiny little processes, but it is a much more definite like grouping of outcomes that makes it feel very outcome focused. So
yeah.
Am I breaking up?
Slightly, but you're dipping in and out, so I'm still following. Yeah,
I think that's the key with, even if you're not trying to be a professional athlete and you're just wanting to sort of experience the process, like maybe you're a lifestyle client or whatever, lifestyle athlete, sorry, and you're in this in a very soft way. You're not sort of all the way at the extreme end. You've got to remind yourself that the process is what you like, and or at least even if you don't enjoy it, you've got to find things about it that you enjoy, so that you are process focused. Because a process focused athlete in any capacity or in any extreme, in any capacity of extremity, will be more successful. 100%.
Yeah. How exciting is it to progress, man? Every little season, every little phase it's all working towards a bigger picture. It is exciting. It's like, just like looking at this little staircase ahead of you, and you're climbing, you're never going to stop. There's no end to this game that we play.
It's cool. Once you see it like that, it's kind of confronting, because you're like, actually, what's the point? There's a moment where you're like, what's the point? But then you're like, well, the point is that there is no point, right? The point is that I just love it. That I love the process of trying to achieve it.
You get a good view.
Yeah.
You get a good view at the top of the staircase. The higher you go, the better the view.
Yeah. It's like, it's reminding yourself of passion. And that's really key. It's a really tough post-show, especially in off-season. And you've experienced that, in some capacity with a longer off-season. Like, the longer your off-season is, the harder it is to stay passionate in the same way that you would be 4 weeks out from a show. So you've got to do little things to keep yourself in the game, Do you want to talk about some of those things that you do?
Yeah, I think probably mine is maybe a little bit different to other people's, just because of, like I've said, I've kind of revolved my whole life around it. So it is a little bit easier to still have one foot in the door when it comes to bodybuilding.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like if you're looking at it from like a normal amateur competitor standpoint, there are just things you can follow to still keep that fire ignited. Like I always see a lot of the girls come to the shows, right? And now we have three seasons a year. So any show that you can go to it. Because I remember the first time I watched a bodybuilding show, and I still get like this rush, maybe on like a different sort of scale. But the first time I watched a bodybuilding show, it was so emotional for me. I've chatted to you about this. Like I was sitting there like in awe, and this atmosphere was all around me, and I was like, fuck, like this was my fuck yes, right? I was like, fuck yes, this is what I want to do. And yeah, the more like you can get into spaces and environments like that, the more kind of fuel you pour on the little fire that you have within you that's telling you this is where I want to be, like this is what I want to be doing. And then just keeping your habits, whatever habits you build within, maybe like your prep, like your posing, tracking your food, obviously going to gym, doing your workouts, things like that. If you can just continue those in your off season, that'll help to kind of form the bigger picture that we're trying to chase. Mindset wise, like I've always kind of been focused on the bigger goal, and that continues to shift around for me as well, so however far that may seem or however close that may seem, like it continues to shift. And like we were talking about before, just breaking up those goals into small ones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're very good at that. We're very good at like timeline planning, and like I'll be like, okay, like we're doing this 4-week cut. I'm looking forward to the end of that. I can see the physique. That's my goal for this like little season. And then the next thing after that, it's like, okay, now we're going into a growth phase. Now we're going to like a high volume phase. That's my new goal, right? It's just to keep progressing in weights and reps, things like that. And then eventually, like before you know it, you blink your eyes and you're back on stage again.
Yeah.
Never as far away as it seems. Even though in the thick of it, it might seem like forever.
Yeah, I was about to say that is with bikini especially, obviously other categories, different approach, but with bikini, you don't really want to get too far away from stage condition, like 8 to 10 kilos, absolute max. If you can hold it, if you're a taller person, if you're a shorter girl, not person, you're going to hold less weight above stage weight, right? The shorter you are, the less weight above stage weight you're going to hold. The good thing about that, there's a good and a bad thing about that. The good thing about that is that you don't need to get out of shape, so you can sort of be more comfortable. It's not like you need to put on a hectic amount of body weight and muscle, like maybe other classes are different. Obviously, there's arguments for and against insulin sensitivity and being leaner and stuff like that. But for bikini, we want to stay close to assess the shape changes. So that's a good thing. The bad thing about that is that you don't have a lot of muscle to play with. So your training has to be very specific, and you have to be very careful about the trend. But the way you manage that is plan a timeline. So if you got 50 weeks before your next show, you don't want to spend 30 weeks in a surplus and, then 20 weeks in a prep. You want to stay closer to condition, spend less time prepping, and sort of break that surplus up into little phases of mini cutting or maintenance. And plan things in those phases, like maybe plan a holiday in a maintenance phase, plan a photo shoot at the end of a prep, at the end of a mini cut, this sort of stuff. Like plan it so that it's structured around those little phases to keep you closer to conditioning. But also depending on your body type, you might have more room to move. You might mini cut more often, or you might mini cut less often, depending on your metabolism, things like this. So having a good understanding of your body and structuring your off season around for bikini, with the bikini criteria in mind, is very, very useful, because you can use it to your advantage, rather than sort of having 50 weeks of surplus and just being 30 kilos above stage weight. You want to be aware and treat your off season like a mini prep. Like you're checking in the same way, you're practicing your posing the same way, you're just eating a little bit more. So there's motivation with that to practice your posing so that you look good. Like if you're holding too much body fat, you're not going to enjoy your posing. You're not going to like how you look. So there's little things that you can use to keep yourself accountable and stay focused. Especially if you're analyzing your physique all the time, you're gonna see little things like, you might change your posing, you might address your training better if you are in better condition. So there's all little
that's a common thing I
Easter
see.
eggs.
Yeah, common thing I see. I just feel like the further you get out of condition, the less close that goal obviously is, but the less close it seems, and it seems just suddenly very out of reach for you, and it seems very unmotivating to work towards, because then you got to like trade maybe like a 12-16 week prep for then like a 28 week prep, and now suddenly half the year you've spent in a deficit, and it's not, again, like it just doesn't feel as enjoyable, like we're trying to find the small wins here. It's a little bit harder when prep has to stretch out for so long and you can't see those improvements, because we still do want to see improvements in off season. You want to be able to kind of look at your physique and maybe be able to compare it to 4 or 5 weeks ago and see little changes straight away, like, okay, wow, that's looking fuller, that's looking different. But like you were saying, if you go too far in the other direction, it's unmotivating and it's harder to see goal and see the end vision when it's getting lost.
100%. And that's the cool part about planning it, like really structured, having a really structured off season with those phases, timeline, is if you think about, like, if you have a 12-week surplus and then a 6-week deficit, and then another 12-week surplus, and then another 6-week deficit, then a 12-week surplus, and then you start prep, you've got really good information on how much body fat you're losing every time you do a 6-week deficit, mini cut. And so, like, what you then relate that prep to is like, maybe you need, like, okay, if I'm losing this much body fat and I'm only this much above stage weight, I know I need maybe 2.5 times that amount that I normally do in the mini cut for the prep. And so, okay, I need 6 times 2.5. So I need now to have 16 weeks prep to nail my conditioning, maybe with a little bit spare at the end there. So it's no different to the mini cuts you've been doing all off season. It's just a little bit longer. So like you said before, you don't have a 28-week prep. You've broken the prep up into different phases throughout the off-season, and it's all one prep, You've just got a little bit more freedom. So what that ends up doing is the more accurately and consistently you apply yourself to the process of bikini off-seasoning, the less it feels like a prep, because instead of being perfect for 28 weeks, you can be more sort of lenient for 52 weeks. And still have the same outcome. And it breaks the whole thing up, but you still have full control and you're able to optimize the process because you're in a position where you're within striking distance rather than needing to lose 30 kilos. So it makes all of that experience better, because there's not a human on earth that enjoys being in a deficit for 28 weeks. Like, it's just not an enjoyable thing. It doesn't matter who you are.
It's not fun.
It does not matter how serious or how much you love bodybuilding. That's going to suck. Doesn't matter. Like, it will always suck. So there's a better way.
Yeah. So that all ties into structuring your off season and planning out your timeline, and probably having that from the get-go, honestly. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of leeway as to, like we were saying, if you need a reroute, if there's road blocks and we got a detour and things like that, you have a little bit of leeway there. But if you can have that like almost loose little timeline and structure to work around, obviously incorporating your life events and enjoying yourself and things like that, if you can have that plan from the get-go, your only job is now to just be the athlete and tick your boxes. Honestly, being an athlete is like the easiest thing in the world. You literally are getting told what to do. Your only job is to do it. It's the best. I wish I could have spent my whole life like this. I wish I could have woken up and someone's already decided what I'm having for breakfast and, what I'm going to do that day and how my schedule is going to look. It's the easiest thing.
Yeah, if you thrive on routine, it's the best lifestyle. Yeah. It is really weird. Like, obviously, since retiring from competing, I still live the same way. Obviously, I just eat, like, less food and, don't train as heavy and things like this. But I still have the exact same, like, habits and routine. Obviously don't track my food as heavily, but I still eat pretty much the same stuff. And it just stays with you and you just feel better. So, it's one of those things. If you're an athlete, you'll always be an athlete in your mind, and you'll always feel more comfortable when you have structure and routine. So embrace it. There's
lifetime contracts.
Yeah. There's absolutely nothing. Yeah. There's nothing to be lost by being structured and routine. There's only good things that come from that. So yeah, I mean, we were meant to do a 15-minute episode, but now we've done an hour. So we might wrap it up there.
This is always our problem. We're too good at yapping, man. Who let us have a podcast?
But I think that's, there's one thing to take away from this is there's no shame in having a bad experience. I think that like at the end of the day, like as an athlete, you just got to do what you got to do sometimes to achieve a result. And that often is in a prep. Like you see a lot of athletes have that experience where they just have to get in condition and they do whatever it takes. And if that has been your experience and you're struggling in off season or struggling in the reverse because of that experience, just know that it will improve if you approach it the right way, and just know that it doesn't have to always be this way, and you can get back to loving it. It just takes a little bit more effort, and it takes a little bit more planning, executing. So if that's where you are and you're struggling with what you're doing, reach out to either one of us and we can point you in that direction. And we're also happy to help you if we have the capacity to. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys if you're struggling. Also, if you're killing it, we'd love to hear from you as well. And yeah, keen to see how everyone's off season goes, especially the season A girls. There's a lot of good athletes from season A that I'm keen to see, how they improve based on those shows.
Keep smashing it, guys. Like, honestly, it's only going to get bigger and better from here. Head down, do the work, and fall in love with it. Keep that fire alive.
Love it. All right, guys, that's it. And we'll talk to you all in the next episode.
Bye.